Welcome Year 3. Welcome to the second English lesson of Monday. So this lesson is on writing, and the LI for the lesson will be to write own verses of a poem to show an understanding of the characters. Now you're going to be using the poem Please Mrs. Butler. You know about this poem already because we did it in the reading comprehension lesson. So you will write 2 of your own verses. Instead of watching the video, I'm going to read the poem to you first, just so that we can have a recap on the poem itself and the characters in the poem. Please, Mrs. Butler, this boy Derek Drew keeps copying my work, miss. What shall I do? Go and sit in the hall, dear. Go and sit in the sink. Take your books on the roof, my lamb. Do whatever you think. Please, Mrs. Butler, this boy Derek Drew keeps taking my rubber, miss. What shall I do? Keep it in your hand, dear. Hide it up your vest. Swallow it if you like, my love. Do what you think best. Please, Mrs. Butler, this boy Derek Drew keeps calling me rude names, miss. What shall I do? Lock yourself in the cupboard, dear. Run away to sea. Do whatever you can, my flower, but don't ask me. Well, there you go. That's Please, Mrs. Butler. So if we look at the right-hand side, we've got structure of the poem. So first of all, you need to write 2 of your own verses. And the top tip here is, remember, the child speaks first, then Mrs. Butler replies. So we're going to have a look at how do you write your own 2 verses. So let's go with tip number 1, verse 1, line 1. Always starts with Please, Mrs. Butler. You will write the same. So your own verse 1, will start with Please, Mrs. Butler. So we're looking at the structure. How is this poem set up? There is a pattern. Top tip number 2, verse 1, line 2, always has this boy Derek Drew. You will write the same. So in the second line of verse 1, you need to write, this boy Derek Drew. Top tip number 3, verse 1, line 3, write your own excuse, then finish with miss. So in the reading lesson, you wrote down some of your own excuses. So you could use the excuse that you came up with in the reading comprehension and put it into your poem, if you like. And top tip number 4, verse 1, line 4, always ends with, what shall I do? So when you write your own verse 1 will finish with, what shall I do? So the student's asking for advice. And then in the second verse, the top tip is Mrs. Butler replies to the child. So in the second verse that you write, top tip number 1 will be verse 2, line 1, write your own advice. Finish with dear. So what advice are you going to give the child? Remember, this is a humorous poem, so think of some situations or think of the advice that you could give your pupil. They don't necessarily have to be sensible replies. So the idea is you may want to make people laugh. So think about your advice. Top tip number 2, verse 2, line 2. Write your second piece of advice. And then number 3, look at the structure of the poem and complete line 3 and 4. And at the end there I've got, is there any rhyming? Not all poems rhyme. If you can come up with words that rhyme, perfect. If not, don't worry about that for now. That's not really the most important part. So let's now look at the second poem that we did for reading comprehension, which is now part of the writing task. So using the poem Excuses, you will write one verse of your own. So you're only doing one verse. And I'll read the first verse in Excuses. I've writ on the wrong page, miss. My pencil went all blunt. My book was upside down, miss. My book was back to front. So there's the first excuse. So you need to write your own verse. And the top tip is, look at the structure of verse 1. So top tip number 1, verse 1, line 1. Start with your own excuse and end with, what does line 1 end with? Look at verse 1, line 1. What word does it end with? Top tip number 2, verse 1, line 2. Starts with, what word does it start with? And then you add your own second excuse. And top tip number 3, what happens in line 3 and 4? What do you notice about the punctuation? You may be looking at what word is used at the beginning of line 3 and line 4. So good luck with that task. I look forward to reading your own version of these poems. Now, there is room for your own individual thoughts, but try and follow the structure of those two poems. So once again, send your poetry to yr3@grange.harrow.sch.uk. I look forward to reading your wonderful poetry, and we will definitely advertise that poetry in our shout out video this coming Friday. So have a wonderful evening, get plenty of rest, and I look forward to speaking to you again tomorrow. Take care for now. Bye.